Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant, independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. Thank you for joining me today. Again, still trying to get my footing back. It's hard to be out of the flow of this kind of information for almost a week, but there's still a lot that I'm trying to include that I don't think I'll be able to really do in the way that I want to do as well as I would want to do until, as we get more immersed in this over the next week. My point in saying that is I went over a few of these topics today that I was kind of considering and also as well, I'm still a little bit dragging. I'm still having, I'm still a little bit out of the weather. People in my community urging me to just take it easy and not work. It's just not in me. I can't let this go any longer. I can't let any more days pass without showing you what I'm seeing and doing my best to fight what we're looking at. So today in general is going to be focused on two main things. And what I was saying is there's topics that I was kind of going over that were really immersive, that necessitated a more in-depth show. And I wanted to save that for when my mind was more focused, when I'm more, in tune with what I think we're going to be covering. Today's focus is predominantly around two things, which is the Twitter purge, which seems to be happening predominantly, or I think almost specifically associated with Israel and the coverage of Israel and what they're doing in Gaza. And at the same time, a push for how wonderful free speech now is on Twitter because Don Lemon is back and Tucker has his own show and everyone, like all these mainstream people are being praised as the new free speech Twitter media, which is something Steve and I have been talking about for a long time, which is that they're redefining what we're supposed to see as media. And it's just not really working as far as I can tell outside of people trapped in the two-party paradigm. But we're going to go over that. I think it's really important. And we're going to talk about the ongoing, upcoming soon International Court of Justice genocide discussion. And this is really important. I doubt Israel's going to, no matter what happens, care. But what I think is important is that it shows you how much this conversation has shifted, how important this is in regard to the people that are being stepped on. Like before, this wasn't even mentioned before, but on top of that, showing you that there is something that could actually shift in the sense of the way the world perceives what's going on here. And that may end up leading to some level of accountability, hopefully not just Netanyahu being kicked out of the way. I think there's far more involvement than just Netanyahu. But we're going to talk about a part in that is a member of the Knesset, of an Israeli official who has now come out in support of the allegations of genocide against the Israeli government. I just don't know how you continue to compartmentalize all these obvious shifts other than to realize that it's obvious what's happening and some people just don't care or disagree that it matters. You can't keep pretending what they're doing is not the obvious thing that it is. I mean, we'll get into, and the other general point of today is just to kind of flesh out some of the more of the topics that are going on around this discussion and how obvious all of this is and how it is important to keep up on all of this because day by day, there are still new people that wake up to this and go, oh my God, I've never seen this, but I've never heard that. I couldn't believe I thought that was racist, stuff like that. And even today, starting to go back and look at these things. So it's important that we keep on these conversations and that we don't relent. And it's not really about being, it's always about right and wrong, but it's not really about trying to win the conversation here, guys. We're talking about human life. We're talking about the absolute, and the reality being that the world is very aware of what is actually happening, as in, the peoples of these countries. And even in this case, as of now, most of the governments too, even the faux reaction of, the Biden administration acting like they suddenly care after 3 months of absolute genocide. And even then still denying that it's genocide and fighting to maintain the continuance of the genocide, but acting like they're going, well, just, tone it down a little bit. So are we the good person now? Can we pretend that we're the ones fighting for freedom as we just say, do a little bit less genocide and then what's okay? That's the kind of absurd reality that we're coming into, we're bumping up against here. And nobody with a conscience can stand here and look at that and act like that's not insulting to your intelligence. To know that they're using dumb bombs and then acting like they're precision targeting Hamas, or that they come out in the beginning and say that we're focusing on destruction, not accuracy, and then pretending like they're only going after Hamas, or coming out and saying that there's literally nobody innocent here. That was the president. And then coming out and saying, oh, but when we're done, and we're past Hamas, well, then they can all have a better future. You mean all the people that you just said were terrorists? How does that make sense? People aren't buying this. People are choosing to invest in their narrative because they're on a side or not. It's as simple as that. And I've never seen it this clear in this kind of a topic. I think people have just chosen sides, and the vast majority of people watching this are just horrified that we're even letting this go one more day, and then one more day, and then one more life, and one more child, and one more refugee camp, and one more lie over and over. And we just can't wake up. Oh, it's still happening. It's still going on. I mean, that's the sad reality. So we're going to continue to cover that. I'd like to start actually with a couple of shout outs I wanted to show you guys. We're going to be doing more of this. By the way, I had a bunch of things planned that when I ended up getting sick, I kind of put them by the wayside. I will be going back to it in regard to the Substack. I've got a couple of articles I'm working on. I've got a bunch of stuff that I want to publish through there that I just think are good to rehash. And one of the things I just did recently was Taylor was working on a bunch of little clips from the larger Arna Burkhart interview and doing some individual write-ups for them. And so this was the first one from Taylor, lymphocytic infiltration of the heart muscle, thyroid gland, and lung following COVID-19 injections. And it's so this is just the clip that we put up right here. I think it's about 16 minutes, maybe, 9 minutes. And then you can watch the full thing here, but then she goes on to break this down in this is important stuff to understand what we're really talking about, rather what Arna Burkhart was talking about and why this is so undeniably obvious. And we're going to be doing a lot more of this. So keep your eye out for that. Make sure you subscribe to our Substack if you want to take part in this. And obviously, as always, all of our content is free. It always will be. If you'd like to support us through Substack, that's an easy way to do so. Now, I just also had a great discussion, interview / daily wrap up yesterday to kind of get myself back on my feet and into the conversation of things in the swing. And this was with Whitney Webb to kind of get her take on the direction. We've talked a lot since even the beginning, like post the, whatever you want, the ongoing genocide against Gaza, that we've danced here and there around other topics. Here the CBC conversation talked about East Palestine for a minute. We talked about, we've been all over the place. But what I wanted to make sure we followed up with Whitney on is this overlap. She had a really great article around FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, really interestingly showing this. Really the quickest point is about how he was essentially, she argues, the person that was setting up like this transition to like a public-private partnership of the stablecoin, or rather CBDC conversation, where it would end up being like a Wall Street funded kind of, really for me, this is all we're living under right now. There is no such thing. It's all the same thing. That's what fascism ultimately becomes, the blending of all of it. But that's what the WEF is all about, the public-private partnership. So when it suits them, it's totally, private information. You can't ask, you can't FOIA, right? So I wonder where all the hidden dangerous things are going to fall under. And then the other side of it is that, look, we're transparent. We're the government helping you. It's none of that. Everything they're doing is completely manipulative in regard to how it presents itself to you. You can believe that they're doing it for some greater reason. But my point is, if they're working with people like this in the conversation, people like Sam Bankman-Fried, who, I don't want to go off forever. Watch the show. She's so immersed in these topics, and it's so fascinating to watch her go off on all the way these things connect. And the point is, obviously, as you know, we're very, very concerned about the direction of the CBDCs and what will go along with that. The control structure, which it's not even up for debate. As we played the clip before, I think it was the Minnesota Federal Reserve chair, I forget the guy's main title, basically just saying on the record, and we don't take him at face value, neither Whitney or I believe he means this, but the point is, well, we know why China wants this. We don't know why we want this, because all it does is give more control over your life. Yeah, duh. That's exactly the point. They know that. We know that. They know you know that, and act like if we do nothing, then you're accepting that. That's kind of how this works. Now, the real question, and we haven't gotten to this in this episode, but what do we do in this case? What do we do to stop this, if that's even possible? I don't think that it is, quite frankly. We should sure as hell try. But that's something somebody asked me recently, is that, we're all kind of terrified about this, but I think we're at the point where this is going to be driven forward regardless. And it's about how we individually take action and our choices and the way we live our lives and how that will affect the larger agenda going forward. It's one of those things where, like with glyphosate, for example, I make that point all the time. We were screaming about that. Plenty of people were saying, this is bad. This is going to hurt the planet. They're not listening to you. This is good. Endocrine disrupting chemical. And nobody even, barely cared. And still, it doesn't seem like they do. But the point is, now we're well past that. So now, even if we woke up today and everyone in the world was like, glyphosate's the worst thing you could possibly imagine, too late. It's in the air you're breathing and clothes you're wearing. It's everywhere. And so my point about this kind of thing is I feel like we might have already passed that point of no return. So the question is, how do we then engage with this or not in a way to actually better our future under this control structure? My hope is that we can stop something like this from happening. But I see far too many people, largely in the two-party paradigm, for different reasons, all seemingly driving the acceptance of something like this and calling the people that care conspiracy theorists. So speak up about it. Have enough individual care for your own life in the world to actually take personal choices, to start voting with your dollar, right? Stop leaning into petty conveniences that completely remove your privacy just because it gives you one extra thing, or here's some free cryptocurrency, or, whatever else is happening, right? I don't want to say take hard choices for the betterment of everybody. It's exactly what they're pushing, but ultimately realize that the easy thing coming from the government is rarely in your best interest. Oh, and then we talked about the Epstein conversation as well, we should be skeptical about this as well. There's a lot flying around. But Bros just pointed out that apparently new documents now show that Trump is on these lists. And it's just like this back and forth of, you pay attention. I'm in no way trying to diminish the importance of what this is all showing. Just don't take it at face value. Question whether we're being used, or whether in that case, maybe Trump was added or not, or removed, or, that I don't know why that wouldn't be something we all concern ourselves with. Now, a couple of other points around some COVID-19 stuff. I thought this was really interesting. This just came out from, today actually. And it's simply saying Fauci answers not recall over 100 times. Not really surprising. I think this guy is very aware of how rapidly the ground is receding from beneath him, but he over 100 times. And it says revealing drastic and systemic failures. Now, we know this. He wrote the cell.com article I've referenced many times that just lays it out that this didn't work. It was a failure, and that we need to stand back and reflect on how and even though he wrote that, they were sprinting in the direction of exactly what he said wasn't working. Multiple injections are being made based on the mRNA platform failure. Now, you can argue that the idea is not a failure. That's up for you to, I guess, deny. But the point is that this didn't work. Now, that may be because of any number of other reasons, but the mRNA platform use for the COVID-19 injection, as he wrote in this discussion, did not work, largely because it was aimed, this is what Dr. Bhakti was saying in the very beginning. You cannot give somebody a shot in the arm and fight a respiratory virus. And it's like, we act like that's not, that's what they ultimately end up saying. You don't have any mucosal immunity, but yet we still give flu shots, the same thing. But we know, who cares? It's all nonsense, right? We just ignore it and move to the next agenda. Well, it's obvious that this person is now trying to hide from these mistakes and acting like he doesn't recall. Where do we see that before? We see it all the time. Comey, plenty of examples where they get trotted out and they're just, I don't know, I'm not sure, I don't recall. What was it? And that just goes away. Or people like Clinton can have entire scathing presentations about all the things they do, and then nothing ever happens anyway. So I think it's important to realize that what this really shows me is that he knows that we see through him. The congressional dynamic knows that we're asking for kind of accountability here. So the real question for you is, do you believe that this is real? Do you believe that they care? The person that's initiating this, or the people that are asking him questions? Do you think they're really interested in finding out? Or is this all a dog and pony show made to make you think that that's happening? Certainly people involved with the paradigm have opinions about that. I don't want to be a pessimist, but quite frankly, I don't think these are ever designed to actually get any accountability. Because here's my point. We already know. We make these points about everything we talk about. This isn't my opinion that this is because what we found out. We've proven these things, like with the conversations of the past, like the endocrine disrupting chemicals, or any of these other conversations. These things are not up for debate. These injections are killing people. It's unbelievably obvious. And yet we just keep walking it down and saying, well, maybe this or maybe that, or all the collapsing people in the world that, we were covering in 2021 and proving with peer-reviewed science are suddenly bubbling back up again. Good. Talk about it. But it's amazing that it becomes a conversation every time. Do we know what's happening? Of course we know what's happening. Something is being given to people that's causing them to collapse. You could argue it's not the injection, but we can't pretend like it's not happening. And that's what we keep getting into. So when we trot somebody like this out and he acts like he's not sure and it just muddies the waters, we already know what he's done. We already know what he's involved with, going back to everything we've talked about, to the origins of this conversation and long before with NIH and their experimentation and the gain of function. These people are criminals. Oh, excuse me. The EPPP research that they literally changed it to mid-conversation like that wasn't obvious. And then stood up and went like, I don't even gain of function. What are you talking about? He literally tried to play stupid. And yet we act like this is some kind of engaged truth dynamic. Sorry, I'm feeling very pessimistic about this today. Now, another point, so you can see as this rolls back in, as I think Orwell shared with me, largest U.S. COVID outbreak since Omicron. So we're told, because Narwhal says it, so it must be true. A new COVID variant. It's the JN1, the same one we told you they were screaming about 3 months ago, is leading the largest wave of transmissions across the United States. Okay, where are the numbers? I don't see the largest sweep. Okay, so let's say it says the largest wave of transmission since 2021 to sweep across the U.S. Now, does that say sickness? Does it say illness? Does it say death, hospitalization? No, it says wave of transmission. And then there's a huge picture of PCR tests. That's what she's pointing out. By using a PCR test, yay, we clearly know what's going on yet again. Now you can decide for yourself. If you think there's something going around, do what people have always done. Be smart. Wash your hands. Eat healthy. Exercise. Drink water. Don't cough in people's mouths, right? Dumb stuff. But the idea that you think you need to wear a mask and stay in your home and take dangerous injections that guarantee that you're going to be more sick when you're done, that's just willful ignorance. These things are less than the flu, and it has been from the very beginning. That is if you even think that it's there. Now, these aren't up for debate. These are coming from peer-reviewed scientific studies around the thing that you guys are pointing at out there. And, the people that are, I'm just Xboxing out that point for the people that think it's not even there at all. The point is that most people are debating about it. And the reality is that either you say, trust the science, which means you listen to the information that scientific studies are showing, which is that it's not that dangerous, or you don't, I guess, and pretend that it's going to kill everybody, even though nothing backs that up. Like, it just becomes this willful game. This is going to continue to be pushed. I can promise you that. And all it's going to end up doing is going to be another system of let's start testing. And suddenly we see more cases, and suddenly there's another problem. And suddenly hospitals are overwhelmed because all the hypochondriacs run in and say, I have a sniffles. And suddenly and this is a cycle. And I think a doctor was just talking about this. Every time they can count on that, when he comes out and says, X, Y, and Z is probably going to happen. Well, everybody out there who's a worrywart like that's going to say, oh my God, I feel it. My skin's starting to hurt. Running into, and that you get overwhelmed in the hospitals. That then becomes a justification to point at it, saying, look at how we're overwhelmed. And in most cases, that's not even actually happening. Over and over and over. No one's suggesting that people can't get sick. I just got sick, or whatever you want to call it. But the funny thing about it is there's such this weird divide about it right now, where suddenly people are acting like now even saying you get sick is somehow like a conspiracy theory. It's like, wait a minute. So are the people in train theory now telling you that you can't even get sick from anything ever? Now, that's not true. I don't believe that the honest people in that conversation are actually saying that. But it's interesting. You can come out and just be like, hey, I'm recovering from something. And the conversation becomes like you're somehow promoting something. My promotion was basically the argument that a healthy person and exercise and vitamins is all you really need. That's my actual opinion. But it's interesting how the pushback becomes this divide of, I think, it's the two-party paradigm in essence, and neither side really has the truth. Now, the UN News points something out. This brings us into the conversation of Gaza. And he simply says, today, the situation in Gaza is unimaginably stressful for children. We do not want to see children who survive the bombing to die because they're not vaccinated. And I keep pointing this out. I just don't know why this push at this time makes any sense unless the obvious. And that concerns me. And this is the same point to make before. People would love to pretend like because you point out that what the UN said in one circumstance is the actual truth, because it is, suddenly becomes the ignorant assumption that you believe or blindly trust the UN. And that's just stupid because it's not true. Truth can come out from even corporate media. It happens. The point in this case is to show you that just because you could point out that, yeah, Israel's killing people that are part of the UN. And yeah, the UN, for whatever reason, is calling out what Israel's doing. Does not change my absolute concern for the body and its agenda. And in this case, why you would be in the middle of people being like, these kids are barely able to feed themselves and some of them are dying because of that. And you want to rush in with injections. How about you rush in with food? How about that? It's not happening. Like they keep pretending like they are still getting a fraction of what's actually needed. And what are they vaccinating them for? How much you want to bet it's exactly what you think. And probably not even for the things that were probably being created by what the Israeli government is doing on the ground. And I mean like cholera and things like that. This is happening too. So these agendas are always intertwined. And one thing I wanted to point out, excuse me, just as a humorous point to start on this, that I've always pointed out in the past, that I really do think is just one of the most stark examples of, it's one of these things that stands out, that anybody with honest intention, doesn't mean you have to believe that what I think this is what it is, but you have to acknowledge how often this happens and how conspicuous it is. Over and over and over in exact situations like this, ISIS will suddenly come out, and usually at times like this too, where they haven't even heard of them in months. And all of a sudden, ISIS just comes out of nowhere and attacks Israel's enemies. Because that makes sense, right? Now, look, Iran, there's an ideological divide between what the Wahhabist background of ISIS and the Iranian background. The point is that every time you see this overlap, and ask yourself how, if Hamas is ISIS, which is the dumb thing they keep saying, well, are you now saying that Hamas is bombing Iran? But aren't you the one telling us that Iran is working with Hamas and they're the ones funding them? Yeah, that's really stupid. And it should be called that, because the bottom line is, if you're blaming and just claiming Hamas is ISIS or Nazis, whatever narrative they want to spin that day, you can't then go on to make the next argument that completely contradicts that point. And my point in saying that is that they are constantly calling these things out, and you can show that their narratives don't really line up when you stand back and look at the bigger picture. Now, in this case, it's saying ISIS. Now, and the other point too is, I'm not even saying I buy what this narrative is, or that the point is, people were telling me that this narrative seems to be contradicted. And, the point is, we're being told from corporate media that that's what ISIS claims. So question that, of course. But my point is not about whether it happened. My point is that the media is telling you ISIS claims responsibility for attacking Iran. And I said, how many times exactly do we need to see ISIS attack the enemies of Israel? Usually at the peak of hostile rhetoric, before we truly understand what we're actually seeing. Just really let that sink in, because it happens all the time. Or the fact that you've got little pockets of ISIS right inside the controlled area of Yemen that's controlled by Saudi Arabia and Israel, and they've never moved and they work together. Or you can prove that they've really armed, funded, and created them as far back as you want to look. It's pretty obvious what's going on. But it makes me laugh that we can't acknowledge that as, the grown-up journalists of the world. Now, in regard to this bigger picture of what's going on Twitter, it's actually pretty incredible, the people that just got censored. Alan McLeod being one of them, someone I respect. And he has been going out of his way, rightly so, to expose what is going on in Israel and how his corporate media is completely playing, they're just gaslighting for genocide. That's what they're doing. So he was censored. And it was apparently without any warning or notice. Here's what he wrote on Mastodon, or rather, the Squirrel relayed what he wrote, which, by the way, then the Squirrel got censored too. Kind of hard not to see that. But he says, Elon Musk's Twitter just banned me, this is McLeod, without giving any reason. I didn't get any post that was flagged, no infraction, no warning, nothing, just suspended. So I suspect it is because I have been exposing the propaganda of the genocidal Israeli regime and its supporters, including recently Bill Ackman, who is absolutely deranged in his fervor to ban any criticism of him. I would appreciate it if you could post to say I should be unbanned and tag Elon and all the same stuff. Very interesting. Now, this gets further when you find out that Glenn caught a few more things. He says after this, the account, The Squirrel, was highly popular and polarizing. Its focus was on harshly criticizing EU and U.S. foreign policy. Shocking. The account survived the prior Twitter regime. Their recent focus has been on criticizing Israel and Ackman. Just got banned with no explanation. See how it works? Now he says the related issue is obviously Mehdi Hassan's ouster from MSNBC, which again, it's so priceless. Like, I don't want nobody should be censored. I don't agree with censorship of anybody. Like, I mean that. You can, people with disgusting ideas should be able to express them, so we can very clearly identify them as disgusting. That's my coming from a personal statement, not as some collective body acknowledging these things, but just I can go, you're gross. I think you're a disgusting person, but you have a right to be disgusting. The point is that Mehdi was, I quite frankly have zero respect for this person. He's ridiculous. But he has defended Palestine, and that's one of the things that he was, acting like was his crowned, example of why he wasn't part of, whatever. The point is he towed lines, gaslit, attacked for people for all sorts of conversations, and then suddenly started calling out Israel, and now he's gone and hasn't said a word about it. That's a coward. You don't stand up and express the fact that you were. Now you could argue that maybe he's got some kind of NDA, whatever. But the point is that's what happens. And he says his life dream was to be an MSNBC host. That's pathetic. He'd do and say literally anything for it. He did. He became a rabid Dem partisan, the key requirement there. But then October 7th happened. He criticized Israel, and he's gone. If Mehdi is gone from MSNBC because of his Israel criticism, which I think we all know is obviously what happened, he has the obligation, it's my opinion, but I think it's very clear the timing of it all. His silence has been cowardly because he has an obligation to raise the point. But it just shows how stringent are the limits imposed to keep a job in corporate media. But Twitter is supposed to be different, but it's not. There's multiple other X accounts suspended in the last couple of days, several of them large and influential, including well-known journalists. The one thing they have in common, they've been harshly criticizing Israel since October 7th. It's pretty crazy. There's a couple of them here. I think this is a better image right here that shows them. Jackson Hinkle shared a bunch of them. True Anon Pod, is a squirrel. Like, a lot of these are big accounts. Alan McLeod, Stephen Zetti, Rob Russo, Ryan Shedd, Ken Klippenstein, all sorts of people. It doesn't mean you have to agree with all of them. The point is it's censorship, guys. This is a massive pro-Israel censorship campaign. And Furqan points out these decisions has to be reversed immediately. They worked hard to cancel people because their biggest enemy is the truth, or people, who talk truths. They even canceled my account, which is my point. So they're getting into all this other stuff about how the point is this is coming down across the board. Not literally everybody saying bad things about Israel, but in a very clear way directed, which seems focused on influential level accounts. Now, how in the world, even if it was just one person, how can you stand here, Tulsi, Don, Tucker, any of them, and just pretend like it's free speech zone? Like we all love the amazing thanks Elon for saving free speech while you're censoring people. Like, don't we just find that inherently ridiculous? Okay, so you can pretend that he's doing something. Thank you for saving limited speech, Elon. Thank you. That I would go, okay, fine. Thank him for that if you want. But you can't just keep pretending like free speech is the best thing ever on Twitter, because it's not happening. It's just not. Now, I'm not saying it's like comparatively. Well, it's hard to say that, but you could say that it feels better than it was before. Sure. I have my account back. And that's different for me at the very least, but I feel and see, as many of us do, a very, very alarming social engineering happening when it comes to the point we made before about the redefining of what they say journalism is. And that's exactly what's happening now. Getting rid of all the real ones, right? In my opinion, the people like Alan McLeod that don't care about Elon's alignment with Israel, but he says exciting. And Alex, one of these gigantic influencers that just toe lines as well. Don Lemon, Tulsi Gabbard, Jim Rome are joining Tucker Carlson. Man, it's just all free speech icons, right? I mean, nothing says free speech like Don Lemon, right? A entertainment news guy forced into the real news and then leaves because he's bad at it. Free speech. Let's let him on there to scream opinions at you. Hey, of course, he has right to. Not when they're knocking off other people that would make him look ridiculous by just being better than him. Pretty easy to do. Here's Tulsi Gabbard. Oh, this, Caroline, X is the media now. It's exactly what they want from you. Here's some screenshots. Can we pretend like that proves everything? That's the Twitter files. It's which, by the way, let's not forget, do we need to say it? Never got the source material. Gee, I never wanted to be wrong about something more in my life. Why wouldn't we have wanted this to change everything? Never got it. No Fauci files, no source material. And do you remember how aggressive everybody was about that? Acting like we were somehow raining on the parade because we didn't just accept at face value that it was always going to come, Ryan. Of course they're going to follow through with nope, didn't happen. And now we just don't care, apparently. crazy. And here's Tulsi Gabbard. Same thing, just came out. This is today. Why? Because this is a whole new faux free speech push to cover up what happened, or however you want to look at it. So she comes out today and says, hey, freedom of speech is a fundamental right in America. So you align yourself with a platform that doesn't believe in that? Sadly, we live in a time where debate, dialogue, and dissent can be cause for cancellation and censorship. Yeah, they know that. Ask Alan McLeod. To defend free speech, we must use it, she says. I'm announcing a new partnership on X, Twitter, with Elon. Why? Because leadership, free speech is not only protected, it is celebrated. You see my point? You just can't lie like that and pretend and expect people to take you seriously. Now, look, guys, she knows. I posted it. So too did a lot of people down there. And they don't care. So ask yourself why an honest person would know that they're censoring people and then just say otherwise online and be like, yay, free speech. It's celebrated over here where they're censoring people, because you're being manipulated, guys. Now, do you think she knows that? That's up for you to decide. Does it matter? Maybe if you want to vote for her for something, but I'll laugh at you for that anyway. The bottom line, just voting in general, I was kind of joking, but overall, this is not real. And so as we get further into the election and God knows what else, this is going to be more and more and more pronounced and more powerful and more influential. And they're bringing in more people. It's going to become exactly what we always told you it would. Now, I know a lot of people are seeing beyond this, and I hope we can just spread that information. And the real point to recognize is, if you have people out there that are calling this free speech and you show them they censored people like Alan and they just don't care, well, they don't really care about free speech. It's just a buzzword talking point for politics. That's the point. Now, we're going to get into, and again, based off the other main point I want to get into is the Genocide Convention and the politician. There's a lot that I might get into today if we have time, if I'm feeling up to it. I'm not feeling terrible right now, so I feel like I'm got some good momentum. I'll let you know if we're going to cut it short. Excuse me. So I want to start with this. A little bit of a rehash on this overall point, but I saw this today. Or not this. It was... maybe I didn't have it right here, but one of these posts I saw today, and it made me want to reiterate something in a broad sense, like the things that you guys largely know, but just to keep these next few things in your mind as we go through the larger discussion. Now, the point being, if you know for a fact, which I'm hopefully you do, especially after I show you this, that Zionism, one, is racism. That's what it is. It is undeniable. And I'll play for you yet again, Avi Shalom, a very highly respected British Israeli historian, and Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, B'Tselem, and all of them that will literally tell you that's a fact. And you know that. And you know that it's an apartheid state. You know that it's a state for the Jews alone, as Netanyahu aggressively pushed back on when they said, no, it's for everybody. If you know all of these things, and then you're not able to ask yourself why it would make sense that they would kill Palestinians without concern, or that they would want to displace them without concern, and then lie about what they're doing. Come out and say, we're going to kill them all, and then pretend that you're racist for saying they said that. Like, if you can't acknowledge those obvious contradictions, you don't want to. And I want people to recognize that this is not up for debate. This is an apartheid state. It's an obvious occupation. These people are, the Zionist government are merciless. They are murdering people in real time. They are using dumb bombs that they know they can't aim, the dumb bombs, the half the ones they've used. 972 magazine made the very clear point that they're using a AI system like designed to cause more damage, where they then just say, we're bringing down buildings just to bring down buildings. You can hear them directly state there's nobody innocent. So Richie Torres comes out. Of course, this is the whole really alarming overlap to how Zionism influences your government, and says the notion of Zionism as racism is and always has been a lie. I mean, this guy gets money directly from these lobbies, and I highly doubt that he, one, is even aware of what he's talking about. He just says what he's probably told to say. Or even if you do think that, know that he's lying. He's literally choosing to misrepresent one of the most obvious things you can prove. He says Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. That's not true. It's literally not true. There's plenty of Jewish people that do not believe in Zionism, that don't believe in the government and their occupation of other people under the guise that it's because God gave it to them, despite the fact that it was the Balfour Declaration from the British government after the Zionists had continued to bomb British military and civilians and bomb Jews in Iraq and all the different things they've done to drive that into reality. The point is that this is a political organization. that they then use Judaism to manipulate you into thinking it's in the benefit of Jews, when in reality, it makes them more insecure, as plenty of Jewish organizations will tell you if you listen. Anyway, the point is, to single out the Jewish self-determination as racist, we'll see, now that's how the game is played. So he's the one pretending that these things are the same thing, right? Zionism is the determination of Israel, of the Jews. Okay. So because he states that as a fact, he then goes on for the next part to single out the Jewish self-determination as racist. Well, that's not what I said. You decided what I said meant that, then said this, saying that is racist. It's the same as pretending that by somebody saying free Palestine, it means genocide. And we'll just state that as fact because Stefanik said so, right? And then going, do you condemn genocide? As her hands are shaking and she's sweating and she's losing her mind when she did that. And they go, well, there's context. And you lose their minds. There's no context of genocide. Well, maybe not, but that's not the question. The question was whether what they said, and it wasn't. Free Palestine can mean all sorts of things. Maybe it means what you think it does, or maybe it just means free Palestine. So when they would say it means there's context, well, it would certainly matter whether that's what they meant. But to then just say that means genocide, therefore they said genocide, do you condemn it? It's a trap. And everybody with a brain can see that. And so it's the same thing he's doing right there. A discussion of a political organization that existed long before the state of Israel. To say that that is racist does not then become the self-determination of all Jews is what we're talking about, as if we're attacking individual Jewish people. That's the quick game that's played. So instead of when I say the Zionist government killed somebody over there, it becomes you attacking the Jewish person on the corner. I mean, think about how ridiculous that is. So my point is, first of all, to show you what Avi Shalom said about this, in case you haven't seen this, and understand that as he says very clearly, Zionism is racism, the exact opposite of what this politician wants you to believe. So I'm going to go ahead and at least give more credence to a very highly respected British Israeli historian, as opposed to a weak, low-level politician being funded by Zionist lobby.
Zionism is racism. Israel cannot be both. Israel is either a racist Jewish state or it's a democratic state for everybody. And that's what I would like Israel to be. I'd like a democratic solution, one state with equal rights for all its inhabitants. Your organization, Human Rights Watch, issued a report last year about Israel, and the conclusion was it is an apartheid state. And there are 4 major human rights groups in the last 2 years who issued similar reports, reached the same conclusion. Israel is an apartheid state. So apartheid is racism. Apartheid is discrimination. But Israel is the only member of the United Nations that I know which is officially racist. And I say this because of the July 2018 nation-state law, which says the Jews have a unique right to self-determination in Israel. Unique means exclusive.
Yes.
It means Arabs have no right to self-determination. It means even if Arabs became a majority, they would still have no right to self-determination. So most certainly Zionism is a racist ideology, and it is largely responsible for the Nakba that has unfolded throughout the last century and continues today.
And he's sitting with the head of Human Rights Watch right there. That's who he's interviewing with. And it's just one person. I just tend to use his statement because he's very highly respected and he's British Israeli. I just think it's important to understand, but it's not a unique opinion. And that's the point. Well, first of all, the nation state law, in case you don't remember, from Haaretz, where literally a TV host tries to defend what we're saying when we say, well, it's a racist state law about only for Jews. And they go, no, Arabs are equal, as it says right there. That's what they tried to say. Netanyahu responded to him saying, no, Israel's the nation state of the Jews alone. So in response to Arabs are equal, Netanyahu pushes back and says the opposite. And we're supposed to pretend like that's not the most obvious thing in the world. And then you can very clearly look for yourself for Human Rights Watch 2021. It is an apartheid state, a threshold crossed. That's crimes of apartheid, persecution, Amnesty International, apartheid against the Palestinians, B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights group, same thing. No, feel free to do your own research. I'm not telling you to blindly believe it because these groups say so, but you have to be able to look at the information and acknowledge that at some point there is a tipping point and the information is obvious. Now, Elon Levy points out the world has never at any point in history been a safe place for Jews, which is a really interesting statement to make because the whole point is that people like Avi Shalom will tell you, if you listen to him, that before Zionism, Jews and Muslims lived in peace in the area. And that's a very easy thing to prove. There's plenty of historians that will talk about it. But of course, if you tell them that, well, then it clearly defines the reality that what they did caused the problem, right? And so they can't have that. So the narrative has to become there's never, ever in the history of the planet been a safe place for Jews. Does that make sense? Think about how ridiculous that ultimately is. My point is, and this is very easy to prove as well, the most dangerous place for Jews on earth is inside of Israel. That's a simple fact, especially since you can realize, as we've pointed out too many times, that Haaretz even told you that Netanyahu's on the record saying anybody who wants to thwart the establishment of Palestine, the state he's always pretended they wanted to give these people, he's lying about that, as he proved right here. Well, you have to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. That's part of our strategy, he said in 2019. Okay, so the very group that all of this is stemming from was funded by the Israeli government that's currently in control. And that's not part of the conversation. We bring this up every time. The point, though, is that is why it's that dangerous. You've literally brought civilians into an illegal occupation and then use them on the front lines as human shields when you really understand what's going on, and then pretend that that's safe for them as you then fund the group who is right there angry and ready to do something about it, and then literally seemingly work with them in order to make this happen and then go on to kill your own people in the process. Because that's a safe thing for Jews? Really? Zionist government funded the very group that you are claiming this place is protecting them from. That's how ridiculous this has gotten. So that being in your mind, right? The obvious reality of what the government at the core is really about. And then ask yourself how the rest of this would somehow be unlikely. Now, I won't include this graphic again. They haven't updated it since the 27th, but just in case you don't remember, after 80 plus days, almost 30,000 people killed. The vast majority of them women and children, I think over 80%. Injuries, 56,000, 101 plus. No, I think it's actually 112 journalists now, even more. 112. The numbers are staggering. And it just keeps going. And even then, guess what? They just told you, not only is it going to take this month or, half the year. No, they will be fighting in Gaza all year. Quote, that is for sure, says the Israeli military chief of staff. So think about how grotesque that is. As Blinken and Biden are acting like they're trying to get this to tone down, they're screaming into their mic, we're going to go on all year long. Right. As these people are now kettled into a small area, they're literally bombing in the areas they just told you they now have control over. I'll show you that right now. This is not going to stop until you stop it, until you force your belligerent criminal government to actually, I don't know, do something other than allow genocide. And the problem is that they know they're locked in at this point. They know it. They're using their weapons and their support and their coverage. They are now responsible. And so that's why the U.S. government is not going to concede this. They're going to have to find some way to make this contort into something other than what it obviously is. Here's Mike Pence literally signing the bombs that are about to be used to murder children. Because that's what we're dealing with right now. Maniacal Zionism. He's a Zionist, so is Biden. They're proudly going to tell you that. That's the whole point. Zionism, which is literally founded by people who tried to align themselves with Nazi Germany twice. That's an easy thing to prove. It's literally on Wikipedia. Irgun, Lehigh parties, these are groups that literally call themselves terrorists. They're the ones that were bombing the British, bombing the Iraqi Jews in order to justify what they're trying to create. Here is what they just wrote. 3 months into the war. Oh, this was a few days ago. IDF says it's dismantled Hamas military framework in North Gaza. Well, they've said this once already, actually. And you know what continues to disgust me is that, though, yeah, we got rid of it. We did it. The North is behind us. And then you get all these politicians acting like, well, now they're moving. The North has been controlled. And No, it's not. There's hundreds of thousands of innocent people that they're still murdering, still bombing, still starving, still God knows what else. And including on top of that, they were their own people that were just killed in these areas. But here's the point. This was January 6th. And before that, saying we did it. We've kind of controlled this area. And this was the map, first of all, 4 months. And this is what the IDF has accomplished. Now, I want to show you something. So they're telling you that this northern area is controlled now, right? And they're pushing them all down here because the real point is they want to drive them into Egypt. That's the open stated plan now. We're going to get to that in a second. Even though we've been telling you that since the very beginning. And all the governments and the media and the people in the party paradigm, well, you're such a conspiracy theorist, you're a racist. And now they're openly saying that as if it wasn't the plan from the very beginning, like the plan that we all knew was leaked. Always how this goes. My point is, in the north is the Jabalia refugee camp, or any number of other examples that we can prove to you they just bombed, right? So explain for me how that makes sense. So they're telling you we did it. We dismantled the military framework in the north and then bombed a refugee camp in the north. Okay, so either you didn't actually do that or you just admitted that you just murdered civilians because you don't like Palestinians. But it doesn't matter because people in the corporate media do not care about these kind of facts. This is on the 7th, where they bombed more than just this one location, but over 80 Palestinians were murdered in an Israeli airstrike targeting a residential home in the Jabalia refugee camp the next day. So was it controlled and they're out of the way and now you're moving forward, or were you still fighting them and you lied about it? Or are you just bombing Palestinians wherever they are? Probably all of that. Abby Martin points out, in addition to a number of other problems that we could get into, another journalist was killed. Hamza's car was targeted as he and other journalists were traveling in the safe zone to conduct interviews. I just don't know how many more of these we need to see. And it's not just because Abby says so or because other journalists have reported it. It's because it is such an easy thing to prove. We've seen Reuters journalists killed, and we'll talk about it next. A provable example, and they didn't even bat an eye. These people were literally in the safe zone, along with all the other people traveling in the safe zones that they deliberately targeted. I actually think let me see if I can pull that up. Yep, there it is. This is my point. This is what I keep trying to say. How is this not the end of the conversation? Even their own corporate media can tell you blatantly, they not only bombed the safe areas that they said were safe, but they used the most destructive bombs in the safe zones that they said were safe. They bombed the safe zones. They bombed the places they were coming from. They bombed the middle ground. They bombed the crossing. They keep doing this. And then Blinken acts like you're a conspiracy theorist. These people need to, the people that are allowing this to happen and not just ignoring it, but literally saying you're wrong for fighting against it or acting like that they don't see this too, they're allowing this to happen. I don't know how people like Blinken and Biden sleep at night. They know what they're allowing. They don't care. They're literally lying about it and then attacking you for trying to acknowledge the thing that the corporate media in Israel literally acknowledged, that it's happening. And you know why they don't want you to know? Because they're using U.S. bombs to do it. Israel war on Gaza updates, condemnation after Israel kills 2 more journalists. We talked about this right in the beginning. This is October 13th. Israel calls for entire Gaza population to relocate. That's just to show you we were talking about that all the way back then because it was the truth in the very beginning. But Reuters journalist was killed by Israeli bombing, and this was on the border with Lebanon. Remember that? Where that's the day it happened. And yeah, eventually Reuters came out and quietly admitted that it was true after their long investigation, even though it was proved it that day. Proved it. Easily proven. Other journalists were there. The logistics were obvious. Israel said they bombed there. It was a proven fact from the first day. But of course, that's how the world works. TLAV will break a story like that, many others did, and nothing happens because it's the controlled flow of information. Reuters journalists were killed. More of them are being killed. And it just falls by the wayside. But here's what it's meant to do. Journalist Anas al-Najjar, because obviously you're seeing his colleagues get murdered without concern. Not just, oops, you were in the way, but targeting journalists in safe zones. And nobody says a word. The UN speaks up a little bit. But all of your people in the US government and the ones that scream about rules-based international order, they call you racist for saying that. But he says, well, of course, because of all of this, well, he's now going to prioritize relocating what remains of his family to a secure area. And that's how that's supposed to work. It only took murdering 120 of them, though. They got the job done. Now journalists in some cases are going, you know what? It's not that I just know that it might happen. These people know they're trying to kill them. So and I'm not trying to criticize. I mean, God damn, these people have been risking their lives to show you the truth from the very beginning. And so he just is going to say, you know what? I got to take care of my family. You got to understand, you got to respect that. But this is what it's all meant to do. You're scaring them into submission. And your governments are absolutely okay with that. Think about how incredible that is to think about the larger conversation about Iran attacking journalists and China attacking journalists and all the things they keep screaming about. And then your governments are not just doing it, but hiding it and allowing it, murdering mainstream journalists because they don't like what you're saying and then pointing the finger everywhere else. We are watching the worst people of the world in charge. That's what we're watching. We're watching the most obvious acknowledgement that not only do they just not care about it, they're allowing it. They're probably high-fiving about it behind the scenes, frankly. That's how I feel about it. Disgusting. Now, Abby Martin also just points out what I've been trying to scream about from the very beginning. They have killed, at this point now, over 144 members of the UN family. Talk about unprecedented. I mean, if this was Iran, China, Russia, anybody, the allegation of one of them would have been so important that it would have been around-the-clock coverage for a week, but not this. Not 144 people, because all they got to do is go, oh, well, they're Hamas. All of them are Hamas. Even the UN is now Hamas. If you keep pushing, that's what they did. That's like we don't laugh at how stupid they are. And she just says, expel the member state mass murdering your employees. That's pretty obvious. Incredible. Now, Israel's saying its military is starting to shift to a more targeted Gaza campaign. Oh, good. So after 4 months, now you're going to go, maybe we should stop just broadly bombing the areas where our own people might be. Strategy, right? No, their strategy was exactly what you thought it was, to bomb and kill and destroy as much as possible, including the people that might come home and admit that you shot at them in the first place. That's what's happening. The point, though, is that this is now, after all this time, we're going to at least claim to pull back on the troops and the bombings and then start going in with more targeted deployments and trying to seek out the Hamas commanders and kill the... Okay, so that was there all the time. And instead of doing the thing that would have actually been concerned about civilians, you carpet bombed for 3 months. That's what happened. Now they're going to start acting like they're concerned about the large... I mean, this is, my opinion, the walking back of the current phase of this agenda. This has nothing to do with the Palestinian people or what's more legal or even more tactful, or I guess tactical. I think this is about trying to fall back into a presentation of what this is supposed to. They want you to think that this is kind of I maybe act like this is what's always been happening. I'm not sure. But the real point for me is that you acting like this is some kind of a shift into a new phase after 3+ months of just massive, unparalleled bombing campaigns over predominant civilians with basically zero accountability and no real evidence of any Hamas members, as far as I can tell. Now, Bet Selim's also pointing out the 2.2 million people in Gaza are going hungry. This is not a byproduct of the war, but a direct result of Israel's declared policy, which denies them food. That was one of the first things that just I couldn't understand. I mean, I understand. I just don't. I thought there were better people in the world, in at least in some levels of power, to be able to stand up and say, it doesn't matter why you're collectively punishing. That's why the law exists, that you just can't collectively punish. And sure enough, they get it. They said no water, no food. They're all human animals. And then then the narrative becomes, it's all Hamas's fault. If you want it to stop Hamas. As if you're talking to the people listening in America. It's our job to stop Hamas for you. And if we don't stop them, you're going to keep murdering civilians. It's just this, from day one, it shows you that these were terrible people we were dealing with. They just don't care about these people. And here is exactly the point. that these people, the fake altruism of the world, the politicians or the ex-politicians, they're now trying to act like they want this to get better. But their very answers, as this guy calls out, expose the fact that they've always known this was wrong. This is a great clip.
2 or 3 minutes ago, in answer a reply to the chair, you said, and I quote, "One of the things we'd like the Israelis to do is switch the water back on." Now, that says that they turned it off. It says that you recognise they have the power to turn it on. Therefore, isn't turning water off and having the ability to turn it back on but choosing not to, isn't that a breach of international humanitarian law?
It's just something they ought to do, in my view.
No, of course they should do it. Every human being would say you don't cut people's water supply off. But I'm asking you, in your position as Foreign Secretary, around the point of international humanitarian law, if Israel have the power to turn the water back on that they turned off, surely that is a flagrant breach of international humanitarian law.
Well, I'm not a lawyer. My view is they ought to switch it on because the north of Gaza, the conflict is now effectively over there. And so getting more water and power.
See my point? That is the illusion they've created. It's not true. They have zero control over what's really going on under the ground. I mean, everything, right? Hamas does have presence. And whether that's underground tunnels or whether that is in buildings or whatever it is, the Hamas is definitely present based on different examples of the past. I haven't seen any examples of them actually killing any Hamas members. Like they even went out of their way to lie to you by rounding up civilians and pretending like all these Hamas people came out of tunnels. And it was immediately shown to be false by their own people. Even shot some of their own hostages. It's just egregious. But so the game of pretending like they suddenly have control over the first stage of this is just to give you the illusion of some kind of process. It's just a lie. And I don't even know if this feeble person actually understands that or not. It's just towing of lines. But think about how clear this is. They're just tap dancing around the obvious, which is acknowledging that these people did consciously choose to collectively punish civilians.
I'm not a lawyer. My view is they ought to switch it on because the north of Gaza, the conflict is now effectively over there. And so getting more water and power into northern Gaza would be a very good thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. So they won't let him back in. That's clear. So this child has no idea about that, apparently, that they won't let them. They actually just shot people trying to go back to the north. So why would they put the water back on if they won't let people back in there? Oh, because you're going to build settlements for new Israeli settlements, for new illegal settlers. That's probably why. So quick, let's get it back on so we can utilize it now for our new developments. Either way, the bottom line is there are still innocent people there. They will kill them the moment that they see them, which you've seen many different examples of, that they won't let other people go back to their homes, which even apparently Blinken is now saying they need to be allowed to go back to their homes 4 months later. Good job, man. You're a terrible person.
You don't have to be a lawyer to make a judgment about that. You just have to be a human being.
Forgive me, Sir Philip, under international obligations, do occupying powers have an obligation to provide access to water, yes or no?
You're asking me a technical legal question.
Sir Philip, I'm really, forgive me, you and I have played this dance enough times. We all know that under international law, there is an obligation for occupying powers to provide water.
You're asking me a technical question about occupying powers and what their obligations are in international law. I imagine you're correct, Chair, but I'm also not a lawyer. I also just would point out,
Philip, just bear in mind, we've come to such a good place working with you because we have the confidence that you do know these details, and that's what your colleagues say. You know that it's not that you presume I'm correct.
Right.
That is the duty on an occupying power.
Yeah, so
Yes.
Chair, I think that is right. So yes, but I would also add that in answering your questions earlier about occupying.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to apply it to Israel. The facts are, though, that they are required to.
I mean, it's painful. Like, how do you not watch that dynamic and stand back and go, my God, somebody has them by the short hairs. Somebody clearly is influencing how he's terrified to even acknowledge a basic static reality of international law, because that very thing clearly implicates what Israel's doing. So he had to spin himself into a pretzel to be able, I mean, it's just so transparent, and average people are seeing right through it. And that's why they are drowning in their lies. And these very bad at their job propagandists on Twitter are just reeling, saying the same things over and over every day with different dynamic, like they just keep packaging the same arguments in different angles over and over repeatedly. They're losing control. They've lost control of this. Now, Jonathan Cook points out the BBC's reporting on Gaza, or rather lack thereof of it, is beyond parody. And this is the kind of thing we're seeing in the corporate media sphere. BBC and the worst. That, as I'll just read what he wrote, the point is, still holding their conversation back and ignoring the current reality. He says, today's news at 10 featured reporter Wire Davies finding yet another excuse for the BBC to return at length to the fallout for Israelis from the 3-month-old events of October 7th. Followed by him gravely intoning the world's attention is still very much focused on the ongoing war just over in Gaza. Like the afterthought, right? So 3+ months later, your focus, instead of the current ongoing war in Gaza that you allude to at the end, is on the events that took place 3 months ago. There is nothing new in that conversation. The information has been fleshed out. The investigation has been, the idea that they're discovering new dynamic parts of it. It is a manipulation. The evidence has been shown. And that's why they are desperate to keep this in some, that's where we get to the ICJ part of this. They're talking about playing their propagandized control atrocity propaganda video to try to influence. When people like Owen Jones and others who have spoken about it, it is a carefully cultivated propaganda video that has zero proof of anything. It is, here's what an image of something that happened. Let us fill in the context for you. And you could argue that they're right, but an honest person is not going to blindly take at face value what the government involved says the context is, and then even more so stand back and act like this video proved everything. For people saying that, remember who they are, because they are lying. He says, well, the BBC's attention certainly hasn't been focused on the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza. Not a word tonight about Israel's continuing bombing of civilians or the famine or disease it is inducing through its complete siege or Israel's referral to the International Court of Justice. They can't even cover that. Charged with carrying out a genocide. Instead, we segued from an interview with the families of the hostages and a report, the very hostages that are right now suing and screaming to get Israel to accept a deal they pretended wasn't there because they're killing their own hostages by continuing to do what they claim they're doing for the hostages. He's saying it says instead of segue from an interview with the families of the hostages and a report on the We Will Dance Again campaign by Nova Festival organizers, the We Will Dance Again people at the festival who were shot by the IDF and who literally, when they didn't get shot, who got home, were involuntarily committed due to, quote, mental breakdowns. Those are the people who are now suing them. Wonder why. But he's saying that and analyzing Israel's options for running Gaza on the day after, right? None of it. Like they rehashed the same thing of October 7th, which there's every reason to talk about that. Right? It is a part of the story, but to only continue to rehash those events and just step right over what's going on in Gaza and then end with what we'll do after Gaza's done. That's a slap in the face to human decency. Once again, it says the BBC made the Palestinians of Gaza and the genocide they're enduring invisible. That is something special. Now, Naftali Bennett points out the 12-year-old Leo, actually, let's do this one first. So Jonathan is also pointing out, and I think this is the important part, like as they're constantly using their own people, acting like they're doing all this for them, or they're the ones calling for justice. That's not really what's happening here. There's an overlap, but the point is the predominant conversation right now is that they want this to at least stop until they get their families home. As I've been telling you from the very beginning, the only people that your governments are siding with are the government of Israel and their willingness to cover up what's going on. Jonathan says, be sure, despite its obsessive revisiting of the events of October 7th in Israel, the BBC won't be reporting on the latest development. Families of those killed in the kibbutz Be'eri that day are demanding an official investigation into the growing body of evidence that their loved ones were killed, not by Hamas, but by the Israeli military. Their concerns have been heightened by the recent admission from an Israeli commander that ordered a tank to fire a shell into the house where 14 Israelis have been taken hostage. We've covered all of this. This is nonetheless, Israel cited the charred bodies as proof of Hamas's barbarity. Many of those ended up later being Hamas. Remember that, where they rolled it down to 1,200 instead of 1,400? And all that proved was that they were so burned, they didn't know they killed them, Hamas and Israeli and Jew alike. Their own people have admitted this. People that were there, people that fired the tanks, people that fired the helicopters, people that were at the security team of the kibbutz area, people that were coming from the festival. And yet we somehow still act like this is not for sure. Now, he wrote about it here, which you can read for yourself. Israel-Palestine war. Why is the media ignoring evidence of Israel's own actions on October 7th? Well, we know why. Just the same reason you got politicians like Richie who are screaming falsehoods because they're told to. But Naftali Bennett makes an example of this, or uses this is one of the examples. 12-year-old Leal Heterozoni in Kibbutz Be'eri was murdered in her home by Hamas monsters, he says, on November 14th. They lied to you, right? He didn't even care about the context, or didn't know. You can decide for yourself. I wouldn't give him the benefit of the doubt. The bottom line is she was killed by IDF firing. It's a proven fact at this point, guys. And this is just the electronic Intifada pointing this out. And this is the evidence we're talking about. But Yasmin Porat and the rest of them have testified to this. This girl was one of the people killed when they opened fire on the area that were housing a lot of them with both Hamas and their own civilians. They even ultimately admit to this. And yet they'll still pretend like it's all because monsters killed her. And all they really ultimately will probably push it to, if they're forced, is that, well, it's their fault for putting them in that position. Well, that's the same logic they're using right now. We're going to keep killing whoever's in our way until you get Hamas to surrender. That's our job? Why don't you do what you're pretending you're going to start doing now and going in tactically? Aren't you supposed to be the best at what you do? Well, we know that's not true by now. You're going to go in and go after Hamas, right? The only thing you did otherwise was broadly bomb in a way that guaranteed you would kill your own people. And you did. So I do not think that was by accident. Families of Israelis killed in Be'eri hit home by IDF tank on October 7th. Demand probe. This was from 3 days ago. The family's demand, which was confirmed by two sources who spoke to Haaretz, was reported on Friday on Israel's Channel 12 News and preceded last month's New York Times investigation, in which Brigadier General Barak Harim said he had ordered a tank commander to fire on the home of Kibbutz Be'eri resident Pelsi Cohen, in which Israeli civilians and many terrorists were holed up, quote, even at the cost of civilian casualties. I mean, it's on the record. And this is why they know that they used the death of people they killed to push atrocities, to cover their own. According to an earlier report by Channel 12, after hours of firefighting between the Hamas terrorists and the Israeli army on that day, a terrorist released Yasmin Porat, a civilian who had been in the house. So it's interesting. They're releasing a woman and a hostage in general. There's just, or the fact that their own video shows examples of them asking whether or not people were military. Like right now, there's an image going around from the same old people, the same Eli Davids and Eli Levitt, the people on the propagandist on Twitter who are highlighting 4 women they claim Hamas still holds. It's certainly possible. I just don't know why I believe anything they put out. But my point when this was going around, or still now, if you want to talk about it, is that those 4 girls are provably members of the IDF. It doesn't mean I agree with anything. It simply points out that makes them military targets. And yes, because it's an occupied territory, they have a legal right to armed rebellion. So when they went in and they go after military targets, that's all protected under international law. They know that. They just don't care. So now they're pretending like something that was one. In fact, part of that is somehow a crime, as they murder children, civilians, and their own people in real time and call everything else a crime. But Hamas did commit crimes. I've never minced words about that. Right? As soon as that became very clear to me in the aftermath of all the information, they admitted it themselves. They took civilians, they shot civilians, they robbed. There's any number of things that they admitted to that we do know were crimes. Pretty overshadowed now, though, isn't it? The families added that, quote, in light of the severity of what happened, the investigation should be opened immediately and not after the war. These are the Israeli people they pretend that they're fighting for and doing all this for right now. They're going, stop. We want our families back. Not after the war, now. According to them, the army should investigate when the memory is still fresh for all involved and before the house is demolished and rebuilt. I sense something in that statement. Not that that's just like the normal process, but that they very clearly get the impression that this is a cover-up. Not, maybe you should do the investigation while you still remember what happened and before you demolish the home. Doesn't that strike an interesting statement? 15 hostages, including 12-year-old twins, Leo and Yanai Hetzroni, and their aunt, Alaya Alos, who raised them, were gathered that day at Cohen's house, behind the kibbutz dining hall. They were held by Hamas, who demanded that the army and police guarantee their safe passage into Gaza with the hostages in tow. That's the person we're talking about, guys. That's this little girl. Now, nobody, especially now, I'm not trying to act like that what Hamas did in general by taking her hostage, and that was even okay or justified. Just, it is what ultimately went down. And then the IDF killed her. You can't keep pretending that's not the case. Whoever's out there shaking their head. Only 2 of the hostages survived that day. The area residents, Hadras Dagan and Porat, who went to the music festival in Reem with her partner and fled with him to Be'eri when the Hamas attack began. Porat has described in many different interviews with corporate media in Israel, including with Haaretz, by the way, that after she was taken outside by one of the people, by Hamas, the terrorists, whatever you want to call it, who surrendered, she stayed in the area for hours and herself witnessed the tank hitting the very house which held the girl, and then she died. Dagan confirmed Porat's testimony in an interview with Channel 12 Friday news program, Ulpan Shishi, a few weeks later. She told the New York Times that a shrapnel from the tank's second shell killed her husband. Another example. This is my point. Multiple examples of actual hostages going, they killed us. They killed my family. They killed my dog. They killed my neighbor. Or the kibbutz Be'eri security head saying, I watched them fire on civilians. Or people from the festival saying, we watched them fire at us. People were killed running toward the IDF. All these examples of burned up cars and houses and people shot in the road. We now know what happened. The IDF spokesman's unit said in response that the Army would conduct a detailed and in-depth probe, when operational status would allow it. Which, by the way, means when we're done with this 6, decades-long engagement, whatever it becomes. I'm being facetious, but that's not what they want. The people are saying do it now. According to the Army statements, in all the Gaza border communities, IDF commanders fought with great bravery. Combat soldiers and armies, reservists and civilians have all sacrificed their lives in the battles. What a ridiculous statement. Think about what he just said right there. The Army spoke on the record and said that our people fought with bravery. Combat soldiers, reservists, and civilians all sacrificed their lives. Now, you could take that as meaning a random civilian that picked up a gun and started fighting, or you could mean them just going, good for, we killed you for the betterment of our society. Did they sacrifice their lives, or did you sacrifice their lives? There's just no way to see these people as in the interest of anything but their own agenda. Now, remember, these people are now suing the survivors, the very people that Israel is telling you this is all for. These 42 survivors of this rave are suing Israel, the people that we're told rescued them. It just, none of this really adds up. And I think largely it's because some of these people were literally committed. And I think these are some of the people that are telling you they were shot at. I don't think that's by accident. Now, Steve W. writes, the International Court of Justice, excuse me, has an iota of integrity. If it does, it will tell the Israelis to shove their carefully curated atrocity porno where the sun don't shine, and it's completely irrelevant to the case against them. Israel's now claiming they intend to show, which I don't know exactly how the process works at the International Criminal Court of Justice, but I wonder if they're able to just do whatever they want. Can they just show what they want? I mean, I guess if they're defending themselves, that would kind of make sense, but it's like showing, like, it's not just evidence. This is a very carefully manipulated and cultivated piece of propaganda. And it's easy to prove based on people that have been talking about it. but they tend to show October 7th horror film. Now, Steve W. goes on to say the purpose of showing the atrocity film would be to emotionally hit the judges to bypass their rational brain. That worked well with many faux journalists, but a viewing should be declined as it's irrelevant to the case, as justifiable genocide is not a defense. Like, actually think about what he's saying. So what's the point of showing what you think rationalizes what you're doing? Like, this isn't in any way, undermine, like, this is not somehow showing what they're doing in Gaza is in genocide. You see the point? This whole thing is about whether they're committing genocide in Gaza, not whether what they're doing in Gaza is okay because this is what happened on the 7th. I think that's a great point that Steve just made. Ultimately, this is pretty ridiculous. It would amount to, they did this, so what we're doing is justified. And that is not a fair defense for genocide. Now, remember, Owen Jones from The Guardian, who was invited, probably because they thought The Guardian would toe the line, or he as their representative would do so. But he came out and said it didn't prove anything. You can listen to his 25-minute point. This person just wrapped it up. I always show this one. And I went over it in depth on the show. It didn't show any proof of beheaded babies, no proof of Hamas killing children, no proof of rape, no proof of beheading humans alive. And, his point was, as I've said before, he got done and all these people were saying, oh my God, it proved everything. And he's like, it didn't prove any of that. And so he then reached out to an American journalist and said, hey, did you see any of that? And they go, no, I didn't see it either. And reached out to another journalist and they said, no, I didn't see it. So at least quietly, they're admitting to each other that this didn't prove anything. This is a subjective presentation of graphic shots that you then frame as all Hamas, and this is what Hamas did. Like, here's an image of a person's head cut off. Okay. Do we know if that happened before or after the IDF was on the scene? Right? Here's a woman's broken pelvis, which, by the way, is literally impossible to be done by an individual. It causes, they say it takes a car crash level of pressure to actually cause that to break. I went over this on the show, but apparently they're claiming a Hamas member did it. Was that before or after the IDF was on the scene? Right? My point is not to insinuate who you can decide for yourself what happened, but that does not prove who was responsible or whether it even happened the way they said it did. As we've already shown you, they've already been caught using photos that aren't from that day at all. Now, I think I'm out in with just a couple of quick points here, but I wanted to show this. Elon Levy says exposed. President Isaac Herzog reveals top secret Hamas document, another one, just like the chemical weapon recipe, about its super secret child soldier boot camps. I mean, I shouldn't make fun. It's not something that's unlikely. My point is just that these people have been caught. I mean, repeatedly, in really, really clumsy, embarrassing ways. Like this. I can't believe nobody, where is all the corporate media on this? This was one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen, where he says they found chemical weapons instructions in the pocket and then shows you a book cover for a book that you can find on Amazon in English. And I mean, even the image he shows you looks like it's printed out of some old 90s Microsoft printer. It's ridiculous. And then guess what? They never brought it up again. So was that a lie then, Herzog? Is it just not important to point out that they had chemical weapons instructions now? Or were you knowingly lying and now you don't care? Because whatever the wall, throw it all at the wall. If it sticks, we'll go forward, right? Well, now this random photocopied piece of document he's saying is a secret document about their child soldier boot camp, because it's important that they load up on their boot camp documents before they rush in on a one-day excursion into a possible deadly. I mean, again, why does that make sense? What would be the logic of them carrying a damning document about a boot camp for children while they rush into an October 7th engagement? So Herzog can use it, of course. Hamas raised a whole generation, they say, on a diet of jihad and martyrdom instead of educating it for peace. Okay, well, let's just pretend that's the case. Doesn't that then mean that you're responsible because you funded them? Right, so if they did, I don't want to have to search for it real quick. Hold on, I'll just grab it again. That's the craziest part about this whole dynamic. And that's why they're drowning in all of this. If you're telling us that they raised a generation on a diet of jihad and martyrdom, and then we know for a fact that Netanyahu said, well, it's our policy, it's our strategy to fund and arm that group, well, then they did this. Then your own government did this to you, and you don't seem to care about that, or you do, and you're part of some other agenda. It's that simple. And then he says, the day after Hamas, they will have new opportunities. Right. So once Hamas is out of the way, what he's saying is the good people of Gaza will have all these opportunities, except let's not forget that right before this, he was telling you that none of them are good. Oops.
Document, highly confidential, strictly confidential document, which we just unraveled from the Hamas headquarters. It's a brochure, which is a directive by the commanders of Hamas as to how to manage summer camps for children in order to disseminate the values of jihad. It says it clearly, to disseminate the...
I'm sorry. How do you take people like this? It says clearly right there. Jihad, right there. Proof.
Values of jihad and the values of the resistance, meaning terror, and how...
Oh, I see. And there's their game right there. The value of resistance is a legally protected act under international law. So right there, they're telling you that legally protected international law is terrorism. Or that's just his idiotic brain making no sense of what he's trying to tell you. Either way, the bottom line is that these are allegations that are supposed to give you the impression that all they ever want to do is murder everybody all the time. And again, if you think that's the case, then why don't we blame the people that funded them? Or realize that not everybody in Gaza is even supportive of Hamas. And the last election they had was in 2006. And that's because they won't allow something else to happen again. And on top of that, it was a plurality and not a majority. It was only 46%, which then literally proves that the majority does not support Hamas. But none of that even matters because that piece of paper says what he says it says. Proof.
How to make it a militarized society. And it's all over the Gaza Strip, meaning they take the kids. Whilst we all know what summer camps are and what they're aimed for and what a wonderful experience it is to...
Yeah, and you can find 100 examples of Israeli groups doing the same thing. Literally little children, 4 or 5 years old, dressed up like IDF with little fake grenades and the whole damn thing. But oh, it's so cute when it's the good guy bat terrorist doing it, right? Let's all lovingly laugh about how these little, young kids like to look like the IDF. It's suddenly only bad when it becomes the bad guy Muslim version of it, right? That's just racism.
To enable youngsters, kids and adults, adolescents to become citizens of the free world.
Or how about funding all of the Azov movement camps in Ukraine? Remember that? When that started and they were literally arming 3, 4, 5-year-olds and training them to shoot because, freedom. It's so shocking how willfully ignorant people can be when they're tied up in a political agenda. If you're training children to be part of a war, you don't get to pretend it's good when they do it, but bad when we do it, right? Israel is constantly caught for things like this. Constantly. For everything they blame everybody for all the time. It's what they do. It's a matter of policy for them.
With liberties, with happiness, with joy, with sports. Here, the entire aim is to make them terrorists. Is it possible Hamas has a summer camp designed to make people terrorists? Certainly possible. It wouldn't be any more shocking to me than the groups they fund in Syria doing the same thing and blaming that on whoever they're in Syria with, or groups that they are actually manipulating. Every single dynamic you can point at. Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, they're doing these things. They are manipulating groups on the ground. They are influencing generations of children. I'm talking about the Israel, U.S. foreign governments. That's happening all over the place. And does it shock you that a group that they're funding in Gaza is doing the same thing? If that's even the case, I'm saying you should question it because I just don't buy what they're selling. I don't believe 90% of what they're putting out. But even if it is true, you have to recognize this is their MO. It's what they do. Here, the point is, he's telling you, well, once we get Hamas out of the way, well, then they can have opportunities. Again, you mean the people that you just told us were all terrorists? Operating militarily according to rules of international law, period. Unequivocally. It's an entire nation
out there that is responsible. It's not true. This rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved, it's absolutely not true. They could have risen up. They could have fought against that evil regime.
Right. So think about that argument. Would you take that argument to, to Hitler, to Stalin, right? Well, they should have stood up and yelled at him. It's the same game of saying, well, they voted for him, so you're responsible. Americans made that argument. The complete lack of awareness of how dumb that argument would be coming from an American mouth. But it doesn't matter because they're going along to get along. Arguably, you can't pretend that by somebody's voting choices that then cooks them into being murdered. The only point we're making with this is that simply you can't pretend that they'll have peace the day after and new opportunities when you just told us they're all terrorists. This is Huffington Post. Israel president suggests that civilians in Gaza are legitimate targets. Now, let's see where I want to get to here if we just want to wrap on that point in general, but I was going to get into some of the lies. I mean, I'll show you. I mean, this is the article I'm just including because it's important to show that even Haaretz broke down the reality that a lot of these were lies. The baby in the oven, the baby cut out of the woman's stomach, the rape allegations in a general sense, all of these have been shown to not have proof behind them. They keep screaming about it. And this was one of those examples right here. And this is this guy who continues to make these rounds. And if you read this for yourself, it's very clear. These are not true allegations. But the point is he keeps making these rounds. This is what he's saying right here. Told how he saw a butchered body of a pregnant lady. He's talking about the cut open stomach. That has been unequivocally proven to not have happened. Not only because it couldn't have happened in the sense of the people in the area he said he was with, or the numbers, the examples of the children, the babies in the ovens, Haaretz's own investigation has shown that the data does not even remotely support that because of the people that were there, whether there was even a child in these areas, or in general, that there is no evidence of anybody else that followed up after him or before who saw any of that. And yet he just keeps saying it. And this is, many people have made this point about Zaka in general. One of these new articles, and all you keep seeing in this is just this recirculation of the same few stories you've heard about the woman in the bush who saw them cut their breast off and pass to the next one. It's the same story. And it's another anonymous person here. And now you got a story about a doctor who talked to a bunch of them and they say 10 of them claim they were raped and it's anonymous. We can't say. It's all of this weird, unconfirmed, flowing information when we've caught them lying. Caught them lying. People involved with this over and over. I mean, Levy, the girl involved with this massive investigation focusing on rape, has already been caught using falsified information. Does she know that? It's up for you to decide. The point is, they, in some cases, I think, know, but many of them may just be going along with what they're told to do. People come out and said, I saw this woman in exactly the way that we went on to prove was the woman that was not actually there. So does he know he's lying? Does he think he saw something that wasn't there? I don't know. But Electronic Intifada writes, a main New York Times source is Zaka, this group that we can prove, that even Haaretz has proven, is lying. It's an extreme Jewish group that fabricated atrocity propaganda, including the debunked tales of beheaded babies, children tied together and shot and burned, and a pregnant woman whose fetus was torn out of her belly. And they debunk it as well. I'm telling you, it's very easy to show. And I'll include these. We went over this, again on December 3rd. Haaretz exposes atrocity propaganda and were rapes committed on the 7th. And I said many times about this, damn them for making us even have to acknowledge the obvious, which is that there is not enough proof to make that claim. You could argue that it seems likely something might have happened. I would from day one, I would have agreed with that. I did, in fact. But for them to come out and scream that if you don't blindly say it happened, that you're somehow ignoring rape, well, then secondhand later acknowledging that there's no evidence to back it up is just, it's a lie. That's you trying to push a lie. Because the forensic evidence has not, it's as Times of Israel wrote, the window's passed. And that was a conscious choice, which tells me they did not want this to be investigated. And Robert did a great article, Did Hamas Rape Israeli Women? And goes on to do a lot of good evidence review. Now, I want to include this again because I want to make one point that I saw. Now, for those watching, there's a graphic image on this website I'm going to show you, so just be prepared. But this was one of the ones that we caught a while back. I think it was Max that originally caught the fact that this was an older image. I went on to catch that they removed it from this website. but it's saying Israel used this image, and it's actually right here. I've got it saved in the archive, and it's a woman laying on the ground with her underwear pulled down, and it is from 2022 at the very least. That's a provable fact. So this image continues to float around in this conversation. Levy even presented this. That's her right here, presenting that image in front of this display, or in front of this. I mean, this is how ridiculous it gets. You should need more than that to be able to dismiss the whole topic, but you shouldn't need more to recognize that some of what they're using is provably false. My point was this website deleted that after we called it out. You could prove that that image in itself is from 2022. She presented it, meaning she doesn't either care or do her own research. What I think is important to add, I just saw this one get shared or acknowledged by an Israeli official. This is one of these websites doing the same thing, cataloging all of these images. And well, here's this image right here. That's the one right there that we know for a fact did not happen. Now I'm going to just go back because there's graphic stuff on there. The image, the link is included. You can see it for yourself. Let me just do this. It's right here. See it? That's the image, clearly. So ask yourself why we're still not acknowledging, some people, that this stuff is circulating and a lot of it we know is not true. And then yet you get screamed at for acknowledging that fact. Or Elon Levy, again, citing another anonymous individual who's part of some old, that's basically saying, I examined the aftermath. And that does not prove anything to anybody, because the whole point is not what you see after everybody comes on the scene and IDF and other people were involved. That's because we were lied to. Those are the people that said they saw beheaded babies. Remember? That was a lie. One of those guys comes out from this same thing and says, we saw babies on clotheslines. That was also a lie. These were proven to be lies. They even walked these back. That's why I don't trust anything that happened or who was involved, because atrocity propaganda has obviously been deployed. But what he's saying is they investigated the remains of teeth and charred bones, and it's all of children. Another example, he's trying to make the argument that this is how, and then here's the thing. I read the scans of adults and children bound together. We just read that. That's one of these lies that have been proven to be false. The point, though, he goes, you mean these teeth? And we talked about this at the time. Remember this? They came out and said, these are the teeth of these children. And a dentist, and we didn't take a dentist because you can clearly see that's not even a real tooth. They came out and said, look, those aren't even real teeth. It's not even children's teeth. And guess what? They never brought it up again. You throw it at the wall and see what sticks. I think they're so obviously they know that all they're really trying to get is a percentage, enough of people to go along with their narrative. They know they've lost this. And my point is, so now you can clearly prove that there is no proof that women were raped. In no way does that mean it didn't happen. It just means that we should demand proof to be able to make the sound allegation that we know that it did. But that has now morphed into little girls were raped. He says you cannot rape little girls and get away with it. So you have yet to even prove that women were raped, and now you just kind of contorted that into little girls. That's the way atrocity propaganda works. Now I'm going to play this clip, and we might just end here. It's a reasonably long clip, but I think this is really well done, and I've been wanting to share this. Propaganda and Company made this, and it says, an Israeli rapist founded the group that is spreading mass rape stories and atrocity propaganda lies. And this goes into the group, the Zaka group, and this interesting point about this kind of battle for attention of these first responder groups. Really, I mean, it's nothing new under the sun, guys. It's disgusting that it has to do with this kind of a topic. But whenever there's a gold rush, for lack of a better term, people rise. Right? You got all these first responder groups that are now desperate to be the one that gets all the attention, and that seems to be driving their willingness to make things up.
Seen this video of Secretary Blinken spreading atrocity propaganda to the U.S. Senate?
A family of four, a young boy and girl, 6 and 8 years old, and their parents, around the breakfast table. The father, his eye gouged out in front of his kids. The mother's breast cut off. The girl's foot amputated. The boy's fingers cut off before they were executed. And then their executioners sat down and had a meal. That's what this society is dealing with.
Secretary Blinken wants you to believe that this actually happened, but the entire story is a lie. It has been thoroughly debunked. Most, if not all, of the atrocity stories coming out are bogus lies. We've seen them get debunked over and over. So it begs the question, where are these lies coming from? Who is behind them? And why do high-level US officials keep repeating them? Well, the answer is likely going to disgust you. You see, there's a sort of race to the bottom taking place right now between competing Israeli disaster relief groups. It's a competition to see who can tell the most disturbing story.
Oh, you saw beheaded babies? Well, I saw babies being baked in ovens.
Oh, that's nothing. I saw a pregnant mother get raped, baked, then raped again, chopped into pieces, then sold on the black market to the Hezbollah faction of the Mexican cartel.
It's all highly unusual, but the lies actually start to make sense when you learn who's behind them. You see, these stories are coming from disaster relief groups that are fighting for media attention and charitable donations. These groups are in the business of raising money. And right now, atrocity fundraising is a gold rush. Very wealthy and very emotional Jewish Westerners are opening up their wallets to organizations and charities. And these organizations are jockeying for position as the best charity to give money to. And nothing raises money like a good story. For example, Eli Beer, the president of United Hezbollah, went on a media tour around the United States, telling audiences that babies were placed in ovens and baked to death.
A little baby in an oven. They put him in, these bastards put these babies in an oven and put on the oven. We found the kid a few hours later.
Like, see, this is the kind of thing that really makes me uncomfortable. He's lying. He didn't say that that's what people told me. He claims he found that. That has been proven by people that were there, people that know the area who was involved, including Haaretz in their own investigation, including IDF members that have claimed that they never saw anything like that. These people are straight up being influenced in some way to tell you these lies so that somehow downplays what they're doing in Gaza. Think about what that means for who this person is.
This propelled him and his organization to the forefront of the media for several days, earning tons of awareness for his organization's work. He was able to leverage this media attention into several fundraisers where he managed to collect a whopping $50 million from shocked
Wouldn't you argue that's at least incentive enough?
and appalled donors. But of course, the entire story was a lie. Israeli reporter Ishay Cohen investigated and determined that the story wasn't true. Another Israeli journalist, Chaim Leninson, had this to say about Eli Beer and the bullshit oven story. Like any good Jew who sees the rich, he thought about the money and told a story that does not exist. But this lie not only raised a ton of money for Eli Beer, it did considerable damage to the ceasefire movement and cost thousands of Palestinian children their lives because Zionist influencers took this bullshit story and ran wild with it. Caroline Glick tweeted, "They baked a Jewish baby alive in an oven. They murdered his father. They gang raped his mother." Oh.
See, and the point here is that this is, it's not really designed to stop the people like us that are going to continue to do what we think is right. It's designed to cow down, to cow people that are on the average person, right? A good-hearted individual out there who hears what we're saying and recognizes that people are being murdered, but then this story gets pushed in their face by some screamer on the street, and they go, "Whoa, okay, maybe I don't know what's going on," and they just get so the atrocity shocks them back. And they just decide not to get involved because I don't want to pretend that rape didn't happen. Like, that's the kind of game this is. That's why I said, damn them for making me have to stand up and question the allegation of something like that. But that's what they're doing. They've created this.
Over and over and laughed all along while they baked her baby alive in the oven. The Palestinians support Hamas. They love Hamas. No resupply.
No concessions. No mercy.
And John Pateritz, in a tweet that gained 10 million views, said they baked a baby in an oven. He repeats it 3 times. And then he goes on to say ceasefire one more time.
You f***ing baby murdering loving ghouls.
That's exactly. So why in the world would a ceasefire have anything to do with whether or not you agree that that happened in a different, the ceasefire is a momentary concept, or it could be in long-term, that applies equally to both sides and does not gain anything but time. And of course, they could argue that that's somehow but how does a ceasefire then rationalize, agree with, or promote that that happened? It's a backward, ridiculous thinking that is just a shock tactic. It doesn't even make sense. People are calling for a ceasefire because they don't believe that innocent Gazan people or Palestinians deserve to suffer because of the belligerent focus on killing Hamas no matter what. Because what that ultimately highlights is that they acknowledge that they don't care about Palestinians and they're all the same to them. But when they're forced to it, they act like, no, we're pinpointing Hamas and we're trying to save these people. But round and round it goes. If you follow their argument, it comes right back around to, well, we don't care about them because they're all animals.
This manufactured story, manufactured outrage, and provided the media and the politicians with the social space needed to get behind Israel's genocidal war in Gaza.
Actually, and let's not forget, as you guys all remember, Biden stumbled out and argued he personally saw that thing that like right away was walked back and said it wasn't even real. It's just so crazy how bad this whole thing has been. And so we can watch the president of the United States of America come out and get caught lying about one of the most early atrocity propaganda tactics, 40 beheaded babies. And then we just go forward as if the next one was true. Here's a chemical weapons model. Here's Mein Kampf. Here is whatever else we want you to believe I said makes the case.
United Hezbollah did eventually concede that the story was not true, blaming it on a volunteer who thought he saw such a case, but not before raising their money and not before causing damage. Hey, I get it. It happens. Your imagination can play tricks on you. Sometimes you open an oven and you see meatloaf. Sometimes you see babies. It depends on the state of mind you're in. Unfortunately, these people seem to not only be in a victim state of mind, but also a money-hungry state of mind. Because they are imagining a lot of bullshit right now, and they're using it to raise money. And United Hezbollah isn't alone in doing this. They have a competitor in the disaster relief space called Zaka. And this group, Zaka, is responsible for some of the most obscene atrocities in imaginations. These people lied about beheaded babies. They lied about mass rape. They even lied about a fetus being cut out of its mother. And just like United Hezbollah, Zaka is hungry for money right now. Their head of operations, Yossi Landau, has also gone around telling media and donors all sorts of atrocity propaganda lies.
Father and mother, hands tied in the back, and on the other side, there's 2 children, a boy and a girl, hands tied in the back, and they were torched. You can see they were torched. Parents should see how the children are being torched, and the children should see how parents.
Now, I want to reiterate, since this is kind of the guy's, little meme rising up, there are people that will act like the simple disputing of this is somehow allowing it. The point is not that we disagree. Don't forget what he just said. These very claims were investigated by other Israeli journalists, by Haaretz themselves, by people around the area that acknowledged they did not see what he said was in their area. It's not true. And yet it just keeps being promoted. People like, that's why Elon Levy and the rest of them come out and say they're rapist regime, or, they killing, put babies in it. They keep just kind of alluding to these same points. What kind of people support people that put babies in ovens? Like he said that like a few days ago. That's what they do.
Should be being torched. And in the middle, there's a full table of food with those terrorists sitting and eating while torching them.
And that's where Blinken got that kind of, I guess he misrepresented the story from. Did Blinken see that? Think about what it means for Blinken to sit down and testify to something he didn't know was true. That is against the law, by the way. Whether or not you're under oath, lying to Congress is a crime. And so my point is, he just relayed a story about them sitting at that table, and it wasn't even the same thing he just said. They're just repackaging narratives and selling it around the world because I guess they think they have some kind of security in the fact that nobody's going to have the no one's willing to push back on it. Well, that's the truth is coming out.
Familiar? This is the same story Tony Blinken told the United States Senate.
And then their executioners sat down and had a meal.
The problem is that it's a complete lie. According to Max Blumenthal from the Gray Zone, despite the presence of multiple potential witnesses, independent testimony corroborating Landau's claim has yet to surface. He goes on to point out that there were also no children that matched the age described by Yossi Landau in Kibbutz Be'eri. There are no recorded deaths of siblings around the age of 6 to 8 in Be'eri on October 7th. And
not only were there no children of those ages in general, but none of them were later reported to have been there anyway. So just vanished, right? And this is not because, like they were burned beyond recognition. No, this has been investigated. They are lying about this. I don't need to keep belaboring the point. I just want people to understand how many different ways this has been shown to be false, and it still gets disputed and debated.
any record of a young child killed is non-existent. So it's clear then that the story is a complete fabrication. So why did Tony Blinken share it with the United States Senate? Well, it's for the same reason they have been sharing all of their atrocity propaganda lies, to provide space and cover for the Israelis to commit war crimes in Gaza. These lies are meant to distract you from what's happening. And now, Zionists are trying to convince the world that mass rape took place. This woman is leading the so-called investigation into Hamas rape, but the investigation is off to a bad start. During a presentation, she shared a picture of a dead female Kurdish fighter from another time in another place and tried to present it as evidence of a raped victim from the Nova Music Festival.
Another image shows the body of a young woman stripped from the waist down, her underwear were torn.
That's the one, guys. That's the one from 2022, at the very least, provably. So if you're confused about that, it's on the Wayback Machine. And by the way, it was on Twitter until Twitter weirdly deleted that as if that somehow violated terms of service. I think we now know what's going on. The point is, I did find it on the Wayback Machine, as I showed you. And I mean, just in case you didn't remember it, it's right here. Okay, this is on the archive. Okay, and this is from 2022, and it says Ukraine under attack, Ukrainian female soldier. Like in this case, they were trying to blame it on Russia, right? That's how these things work. The point is that this is beyond question. There's no way it can be posted in March 28, 2022 if it happened in October 7th, 2023. I'd like to think that's obvious, but just in case that wasn't clear.
One leg, and she was photographed on the site at the Nova Music Festival.
And it gets worse. So far, not a single first-hand testimony or video proving allegations of mass rape has been produced. The rape stories are heavily dependent on graphic second-hand claims provided by the liars of Zaka. But it doesn't seem to matter to mainstream media and Western politicians who have been repeating the claims regardless. The UK Sunday Times, for example, quoted a Zaka staffer who said, "It was clear they were trying to kill, to burn, to rape." Ironically, Zaka, the group pushing the rape claims, was founded by a rapist. Yehuda Meshi Sahav, who founded Zaka, was discovered to be a serial rapist of young people. For decades, he sexually abused boys and girls. And apparently, Yehuda also embezzled millions of dollars from Zaka to fund his own lavish lifestyle. As the investigation to both his rapes and financial corruption escalated, Yehuda decided to do the world a favor and just kill himself. But the corruption didn't die with him. Brad Pierce, an independent scholar who documented Zaka's corruption, described the group as the most opaque and suspicious non-governmental organization I have ever investigated. This is the group behind the mass rape claims. It's no wonder the world has questions. For Zaka, for Landau, for everyone. But like many of the Zionists spreading wild atrocity propaganda stories, Landau seems to think that these claims should be accepted without scrutiny or evidence. According to Landau, those who have questions about his stories should be killed. This person is clearly insane, yet mainstream media and politicians keep repeating his lies. For example, Landau lied about personally seeing children and babies beheaded at Kfar Aza. An Israeli spokesperson then took his fake story and declared a senior official in the Israeli coronary service has confirmed the allegation of beheaded babies. This made its way to CNN, where Sarah Sidner amplified the lie, eventually culminating in the press conference with Joe Biden sharing it with the American people. It's like a sick game of telephone.
All of them feeling like they had some level of security because, well, if they're all saying it, then I'm sure I could pretend that I saw it. Oops. Right? Biden immediately had to walk that back. And it's not just that he lied that it happened. He pretended he personally saw it. And we know he didn't. It's amazing how those things don't really hold water going forward. They should.
Except the end result isn't just an inaccurate message. It's donation money for Zaka and genocide for Gaza. Of course, both Sarah Sidner and Joe Biden retracted their claims about beheaded babies. There are many atrocity propaganda lies to expose, and
I see one more thing. This is the kind of thing that kills me about the way the faux corporate media, right? Imagine the next day, if you were a real journalist, wouldn't it be an easy question to be like, okay, so you've walked that claim back. So are you now telling us you just lied about seeing it, or were you confused? Did you think you saw something you didn't? Clarify for me, right? That would be a real question because people want to hear his response. You got to start. People need to be held accountable. You claim you saw something and then you walk it back. That should be a big story the next day, but nobody even followed up on that.
One day, we will go through them one by one. For now, you should understand that these disaster relief organizations are inventing, spinning, or exaggerating stories in order to raise obscene amounts of money, whether it's online via their website or in person at various events, for their corrupt and shady disaster relief organizations. And these lies are unfortunately amplified by Western media.
And don't miss that little clip right there. That was him interviewing with Ben Shapiro, of course.
And politicians, which of course prolongs the genocidal war of retribution currently taking place in Gaza. If you would like to read more about this in detail, please click the link in either the comment section or the description of this video. I want to make clear that I'm not the one investigating these claims. That important work is being done by the Gray Zone, Electronic Intifada, and Mondoweiss.
And all three of them have done a great job on this. But let's not forget as well, and I think this holds a lot more water for the average person. So too did Haaretz, Times of Israel, in regard to the rape forensic evidence. All this stuff is on the record. So for the average person, this might seem, oh, those are, what maybe they think independent media is fake news. That's dumb. But nonetheless, if you show the average person that here is Haaretz telling you that these major claims about the Israeli, that holds so much more water for the average person, especially people in Israeli society who need to understand what's going on. But nonetheless, as you know, I've recommended every one of them in this regard. Mondoweiss, Gray Zone, Electronic Intifada have been breaking this story down since right when this was first being discussed. They were some of the first that I was referencing when I was talking about this.
And many others.
Now, I want to end, I think, wrap about 2 hours. We got a few minutes left. I wanted to end with a couple more points in regard to I did want to talk about the genocide, the International Court of Justice. Before we do that, I wanted to point this out. This is Haaretz. Again, this is from the 3rd. Number of Gazans detained in Israel jumps by 150% in 1 month. Witness, a soldier's abused detainees in military facilities. So stuff like this, written by Haaretz, admitting that they're breaking international law by not only arbitrarily arresting people for no reason, but torturing, abusing, sexually abusing all sorts of people in their control. It's admitted. But guess what won't happen? Any level of accountability. There are currently at least 661 residents of the Gaza Strip being held in Israeli prisons. 150% increase on the 260 that were being held last month. Now, that's not the total number. That's just about a specific group from Gaza. But it says the current figure does not include Gazans held in detention at the Sidi Taiman military base. I'm probably mispronouncing that. The point is that this specific, I'll just call it the Taiman military base, is alarming. It is a dark, I'll read exactly how they write it. The number of detainees being held at the Taiman at this site is not known to the public. It's great. It's like a black site on the record. It says a source told Haaretz that they are exposed to violence and punishment that soldiers carry out at their own volition. Doesn't that sound great? Soldier just walks in one day in a bad mood and just decides to go beating up the prisoners. That's what that means. Where's the leadership supposed to be holding people account to these actions? They don't care about Palestinians, and it's free game. These people in the Zionist Israeli government, the military, and the people involved, they have this same mentality. And people that don't get kicked out of it really quickly. The same way people in our government and our military who don't have a pro-occupation invasion mindset tend to not last long in the military. That's how that works. Saying these acts include beatings, handcuffing detainees, which we just saw. All the people coming out with cut wrists and beat up and emaciated, to the chaining, handcuffing to the fence or with their hands above their heads. It says soldiers serving at this location punish the Palestinians if they move or talk, according to the source. Punishments include having the detainees stand with their hands cuffed above their head, tying their hands to the fence, tightening their cuffs, or handcuffing their bags behind their back. The detainees are held constantly blindfolded and cuffed with plastic ties. They sleep in thin mattresses. Now, guys, these are people not even charged with a crime. Similar to yoga mats with rough wool blankets and have no replacement clothing. And we already were told by the ones they already brought in, children, many of them were given dry rice. That's what they got to eat. The source added that one soldier beat a Palestinian who tried to peek out from behind his blindfold. He says that the general climate at the facilities permits the abuse of the detainees. Testimonies by Palestinians and sources exposed to what is happening at the facility state that some of the detainees' injuries are infected. Some of the wounds were caused during the war, but others were caused at the facility and then allowed to get infected. Just take a quick glance over to some of the people being held in Gaza and see how that fares, right? Well-fed, not, given treatment. Whether you want to complain about the style of treatment or not, they were still given medicine and treatment. Not the same thing happening to not people that aren't even involved. Random children they arrest because they want to. Most of the bandaged detainees were sent back to what the soldiers call cages, the places where dozens are held and where they sleep and are not hospitalized at the base's medical clinic. Haaretz reported early in the war that some Gaza residents died while in detention. The army refuses to communicate the precise number of dead. Think about that. In any other dynamic, only democracy in the Middle East, we don't even get to understand. What about their mother asking for their child? Doesn't matter. You don't matter to them. The UN's going to scream about it. They'll call them Hamas, and the US will shut it all down. But confirm that there had been instances of death. They confirm that. The circumstances of these deaths is not known to the Haaretz platform. The bodies of deceased detainees at this location, as well as the bodies of 2 Gazan workers of these other prisons who died in the detention at the beginning, were not sent for autopsies or forensic inquiry. Of course not. They don't care about these people. The IDF spokesman did not respond to a question by Haaretz or whether the military police criminal investigation division had even opened an investigation into whether they, their deaths in general, which, by the way, should legally be required. They're in your control. But you see, the point is, this is not uncommon. You just may not know that if you're only finding this out today. Israel has released some detainees to Gaza from the Teman location in the past 2 weeks without having brought them before a judge. The released detainees have testified to violence, a lack of food, a serious medical neglect. Some said that they saw dead people at the detention facility. Most Gazans are detained under the unlawful combatants law. This law permits the detention of anyone that Israel does not classify as a prisoner of war in Israel, and who participated in hostile activity against the state, which to them could simply be supporting Palestine. The law does not apply to Palestinian residents of the West Bank, and until the start of the war, was rarely applied. In mid-December, the cabinet passed a bill to worsen the detention conditions for this category, literally deciding to make it worse for them. Dirtier, harder, smaller location, less food. That's a choice. And we're supposed to pretend that these are the people fighting for, the rights of Palestinians and only fighting Hamas. I mean, guys, they despise these people. It says, basically, they passed a bill to worsen the detention conditions for this category and also extend the time period until they have to be brought before a judge. So basically just giving them as long a period of time to punish them without any repercussions. A detention order must now be issued within 45 days. Oh, it must it? And then you have extensions. And there's any number of reasons. Or they could just go, we don't care, and we're going to keep you here for 5 years, which they've done. There are people that were let back out with the first deal that had been in prison for years with zero charge. That one guy that we had to get, it broke my heart to play. He's the shell of who he was. He's an emaciated, confused, small person who was beat up and tortured. Why? Because he threw a stone. And maybe just, showed a little bit too much pride. A district court judge can even prevent them from seeing an attorney for 180 days. 180 days. They can keep them for 75 for certain circumstances. This is a way to go, oh, here, 179. Okay, we'll let you back out. That's legal. Maybe even thousands of Gaza Strip residents held at army bases in unknown conditions with no external oversight at all. Hakhmukht had received hundreds of inquiries from families in Gaza looking for their loved ones. Where's the international body for them? And no official body is providing answers about who is being held. They just say, shut up. We don't care what you think. Imagine your daughter, your child, your son, your father missing. And you wonder, did they get taken by Israel? Was he kidnapped by an international crime organization? Right? Was he sold in the black market? Who knows? Because nobody cares about your concerns. Imagine if you're living in some nice place in California, right? All of a sudden your son goes missing. Well, the world will turn over stones to help you, but not over here in Gaza, not in West Bank, because you're not the same person. To them, you are less than nothing. There are currently 3,291 administrative detainees from East Jerusalem and the West Bank being held in Israeli prisons. 3,291 administrative detainees not charged with a crime. I guess we'll have to wait and see how long they get held. Many of them have been there for much longer than you'd like to know. This is just the casual reality of the only democracy in the Middle East, the lie we love to laugh about. And I mean the fact that they laugh about when they say that and know that that's not the truth. But my point is that everybody is also, I don't know whether this is an Israeli politician who is using this to benefit himself or maybe just recognizing an opening to maybe see change. I don't know. I'm a pessimist in this regard, but either way, Israeli member of Knesset has now come out in support of South Africa's genocide case against Israel. This is MK Ofer Kassif, member of the left-wing Jewish and Arab Hashad Talad party, Talah, from mispronouncing that. Around 200 other Israelis have signed a petition supporting South Africa's 84-page filing that will be submitted. 200 other Israelis. I think this is really important. Now, here's what he wrote. My constitutional duty is to Israeli society and all of its residents, not to a government whose members and its coalition are calling for ethnic cleansing and even actual genocide. So think about how crazy it is to have even people of their government stand up and say, yeah, what they're doing is genocide. What they're saying is genocide. Then we come over and go, yes, we agree. We can see it too. All the international groups say the same thing. All the human rights groups say the same thing. The United Nations steps up and goes, obviously, they're telling you it's genocide. You've got groups in other countries who are waging this. The ICJ is going forward. And then other people go, you're all crazy and racist and hate Jews. It's just like, do we all just laugh? These people should be laughed away at this point. So you're telling me that this member of Israeli parliament hates Jews? The Jewish member of parliament? It's falling flat for people right now, and it's not working. But what we need to understand is that they are caught. And that's what's so scary about this. What do you think they're capable of if this is what they're doing after they know that they can't get away with it? That's coming from the U.S. perspective, as the U.S. government and Biden and Blinken and the rest of them. What do you think they're capable of? This member of parliament, member of the Knesset, is saying, we can't just let this go. They are committing genocide. They're telling you they're committing genocide. They are the ones, he says, who hurt the country and the people. They are the ones who led South Africa to turn to The Hague, not me and my friends. This is when the government acts against society, the state, and its citizens, including killing many of them, especially when it sacrifices them and commits crimes in their name on the altar of maintaining its existence. It is my right and even my duty to warn about this and do everything I can within the law to stop it. I will not give up the fight for our existence as a moral society. He says this is the true patriotism. No revenge wars and calls for extermination, no unnecessary bloodshed, and no sacrifice of kidnapped citizens and soldiers in false wars. Now, I'd love to believe that he really means that and actually means that in the sense of every human being and not just in a one-sided way. Either way, it's something that we should lean into to a degree, right? The fact that this person is acknowledging that, we need to start acknowledging that this is what's happening, regardless of what the Herzogs and Levies of the world will cry about. It's obvious what we all see happening. And so this is going to go forward. Here he is pointing this out. This is just him shouting, saying this is his own lawmaker pointing this out. Here is the Al Jazeera post simply saying, which countries do back South Africa's genocide case against Israel? Now, right now, it looks like Malaysia, Turkey, Jordan, Bolivia. Excuse me. But overall, I don't see a lot of resistance necessarily. Like there's a lot of people, and this is that point that I think it was made at the UN, where people that were covering that engagement were simply going, look, from what I hear, it's not really that people are afraid that this might not work. It's that people are terrified that if they go along with it, that it most definitely will happen. And that Israel will, and they don't want that, or that will hurt their interests or whatever. So right now what you have, I think, is a lot of people who are just kind of waiting to see what happens. But it's obvious. If there's any honesty in the world, everything you've ever needed to carry this out is laid out for you by Israel. And that's why I think they're so worried about this. And that's why they're doing this. Israel's now being accused of intimidating the judges ahead of the hearings, which, surprise, surprise, does shock anybody. It says Israel is pressing others to denounce the case in the hope of persuading the International Court of Justice to decide based on politics rather than facts. They've just mounted a pressure campaign to try to influence people's opinions about this before it happens. This is what criminals do. Now it says, this is Al-Mayadeen English. Earlier today, Israeli settlers actually blocked the entrance of the Knesset building, demanding that a deal long delayed by the Israeli government be struck for the release of the remaining captives. And my point is, how long have we been highlighting this exact point? The people of Israel are aware. Now, this does not then translate to they never want to see what's happening in Gaza. I think it's a mixed bag in there. But right now, what it's become is, at very least, that needs to stop until we get our people back, because every bomb you throw in there could be what kills my father, what kills my sister, what kills my brother. And it is. It has. And that's the whole point. And so they're screaming about this. No, it seems like Israel's government has no support at all right now, which is crazy based on where we were 6 months ago. Their own people are pushing back against it. And this is why the comically ridiculous people like Eli David are continuing to use things like this. Do you think this makes my skin crawl? This weird AI image they've created about the Bibas kid, who, by the way, was killed by the IDF. Which I said, he knows that he's lying about this. He says, this guy is 1 year old today. Well, no, he's dead, unfortunately, which makes me sick, because his father spoke up and said, you guys killed my family. Now, you could argue that that's being manipulated by Hamas, but guess what? Other people who have come back have already admitted this is happening. And yet they still use them. They use them. That should make you more upset than anything else. Makes my skin crawl. Same thing. This person doing the same thing. All these guys are lying about this stuff, but just recognize this. Now, you can watch the video, and it is what he's talking about. The point is that this is an obvious reality of any number, just like with the discussion coming from October 7th. It's been repeatedly pointed out. Every time people have come back from Gaza, they've admitted not only that they were shot at by the IDF in the first place, but that the bombings that were raining down on top of them was what they were most afraid of. Many of them have permanent hearing damage because of it. That was their statements to Israeli media. And that's why the Israeli people are going, stop what you're doing. And I think because they're trying to kill them. I know that may be harsh for some people, but ask yourself what they've gained from one of these people coming home. The very first one was a PR disaster, remember? Because she said they've treated me very kindly. And from that point forward, they were trying to stop all of them. And eventually they got forced to do a smaller exchange. And that was after they were grudgingly having to admit that they were ignoring it the whole time, pretending like Hamas won't do a deal. And then they got caught for lying about that, did a deal. And everyone that came home said they treated me nicely. They gave us food, and they drugged them all. It's just this never-ending cycle of manipulation. And this person saying the same thing, that they've denied a proposal for a truce. Not true. What happened was They denied a ridiculous temporary thing that was going to end up continuing the problem when what Hamas offered was a full exchange. And Israel denied that, which again is what's bothering all the people in Israel. Israel rejected the deal for a new hostage deal. Now, what I was going to get into, maybe we'll show in the next episode, is just to continue to show this. Here's another video that was these Palestinians that are in their underwear pleading for their lives. And it's disgusting what they're doing to these people. And then, even, as Kevork even points out, no army in the world shares its war crimes like the Israeli government does on the internet. Why? Because they're telling you, we don't give an F about international law. We're above the law. This is Mossad sharing this, saying a must watch. That's it. Here's a must watch of a bunch of Gaza people screaming to save their lives when none of these people are Hamas members. This keeps happening. They keep just rounding up people, as we've already proven to you, and they let them go or kill many of them, which has already happened. Steal their organs and bring them back, which has happened 3 times now. Dan Cohen, here's an example showing you of a woman right here down the bottom left, coming out, and I believe this was November 12th when this happened. Oh, yeah, it's right there, November 12th. Down at the bottom, these are all people waving white flags, walking in the safe zone, walking through the safe channel to the safe area. But you don't need me to prove this to you. Haaretz even showed you they're bombing the safe zones. But just in case you needed an individual example of a woman waving a white flag, walking with her child being shot by the Israeli snipers. And the child runs. To who? Runs to nobody, because now they're without a parent. God, just makes you sick. And this is what your government defends and calls you a bad person for highlighting. Now, this is just other points about people being released. We're hearing now reports of people other soldiers of the Israeli government telling other soldiers to take certain captives into the other rooms and please themselves, or examples of people stealing blonde children from Gaza, or, any number of other things we could talk about, or just I was going to end with was the obvious continual example that they are going to resettle Gaza. It's not even, like I told you in the very beginning, that was what was going to happen. They all said you're racist for saying that. It's never the case. And here we are. Now telling you that, well, that is what the order is. The order of the day, order of the hour is more settlement of illegal settlements in the occupied area of Gaza, which they've never stopped occupying. Blinken saying Palestinians displaced must be able to return home. To what, Blinken? To their bulldozed homes? I mean, just think about how ridiculous that is. If you thought they have a right to return home, they have a right not to be displaced in the first place. This is cowardice. That is you not able to stand by your original actions or what you currently are doing. You're a coward. And even still within that, allowing murder, genocide, and displacement. These people are not representative of you. The Gaza settlements are coming. The maps they're telling you are already ready. They are being made. It is coming your way. Just like I told you in December 18th. The plan for the new Gaza settlements. Destroying everything in their path to get there. Right. Blinken, can they go back to that home? Right there? Can they go back to that when it's over? As they all proudly discuss the demolition of all these people's homes. Look, that was a controlled demolition. Is that supposed to be about Hamas in this northern area that they currently have control over? I mean, it's always about the agenda. Israeli soldiers bragging about annihilating an entire town. We went joyous to annihilate the village. We blew up the entire village. They are proudly saying this online. Because Netanyahu himself was always proud about stopping what he pretended what he wanted for everybody else. It's always been a lie. I'm just hoping people finally start to see the picture and acknowledge the obvious. Kills me. But thank you for tuning in today, guys. There's so much to talk about. There's so many other things we could have included. But, well, I believe I'll be doing a show tomorrow, but I'm going to give it a second. Orwell's screaming at me to take some time off, so I feel better. But I feel better when I get back into the mix. And, we'll see how I feel tomorrow. Either way, I'll keep you in the loop, and we're going to continue to do some more work. I think some more Substack posts and lots of more stuff coming your way. But keep fighting, guys. Just find the courage to stand up for people that obviously at this moment can't for themselves. Nobody listens to what they're screaming about. Nobody cares that their children are missing. Nobody cares that they can't feed their infant babies. We do. You do. They don't. We do. We know we are more than they are. We outnumber them. Stand up for people that need to be stood up for. And I think that's all we ever really talk about here, right? We just need to find the moral compass again and realize what really matters. And it's not about political left and right dynamics or about what country's in the right because of their foreign policy history. It is about human life and caring about human life and taking action in that direction that enshrines the concern for life. I mean, it's really that simple. Governments will always try to circumvent these things and manipulate you and fight you against each other. We just need to acknowledge that. I could go much further in that and why I think government is the ultimate problem, but I know that's really hard for some people to wrap their mind around. We just need to start being honest about what we care about and stop letting the political dynamics manipulate us into thinking that our morally ambiguous stance is somehow for the best interest of X, Y, and Z, when you know that it's wrong. In your heart, you know these things are wrong. Stand up for what's right. I love you all. Thank you for tuning in today. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Anyway, welcome to the State Department. I think we have some interns in the back. Welcome. Good to see you in this exercise in transparency and democracy.
Is that what it is?
Sorry,
I
didn't mean to break
I thought
out
it was an
laughter.
exercise in spin and obfuscation.
All right. Can you tell this is my last briefing before vacation? Anyway.